1850 now. He's 15 years old. In February, his father decides to send him on a ship, which was called the Lochnagar, to attend the rugby school, which was then the most prestigious school in England. On the ship, he learned to tie knots, survived harrowing storms, and they visited Simonstown at the Cape of Good Hope. He arrives in London after a 5-month sea voyage. Can you imagine that as a 14-year-old boy?
And that was, a good trip would get you between England and Australia in 3 months. My great-great-grandparents took 3 months and 1 day. But if you got caught in the doldrums or you've got caught in the roaring 40s or whatever, it would take 5 or 6 months.
This was during the school holidays when he got there, so he bunked with his paternal Aunt Sarah, which was Horatio's sister. He started the school year in the middle of 1850, and he was the only Australian in the school. Can you imagine that? Like, that's you can be the new kid somewhere, but imagine the new kid from another country in the 1800s, like crazy.
And convict stock or something like that.
Yeah.
That he would have had it put on him.
I think Horatio hid that pretty well.
I know. Yes, I know.
Yeah,
but
they have a way of working those things out.
Yeah.
So he took up cricket within a week of entering Evans' house. At first, he bowled underhand, but it was considered outdated by the boys, so he tried round arm bowling. And it says here he clean bowled a batsman with his first ball using this style and declared, in his own words, "I felt I was a bowler." Now, we know he had boomerangs. You've shown them. Spears, nullers, all those things that you've got there. Which is funny because the only thing that probably wouldn't survive time is a mangrook.
Yes, that's right.
Whereas the wood ones have been so preserved. Do you think his ability to bowl round arm was in any way influenced by his ability to use those weapons?
Yes, of course it was. This is part of daily life, throwing boomerangs, throwing spears, and we know that Tom Wills participated in daily life and daily activities, and we know for sure also that he was very adept at picking up and demonstrating skills in all these sorts of things.
Well, by the way that his cousin describes it, mimicking
mimicking, and that's what, to show that he was good at mimicking shows that he'd picked up Aboriginal culture, that kids are encouraged in that way to mimic and to show skills.
It reminds me of that really early, I don't know if you've seen it, a really early video of Tiger Woods when he's like about, he's about
when he's 2.
Is he 2 or 3 years old?
Yeah.
He couldn't have been 2. That's a bit small. He must have been like 4, at least 4 or 5 as a kid, and he's hitting these tiny little hole-in-ones, and he's just beautiful at that age. So it just shows when you pick up, you have to be naturally inclined to want to be good at something like that.
Yeah.
But if you're good at something at a young age, if you're good at throwing something, it only gets better with age. And the earlier you start it, the better you are at it as you get older.
At 12 years of age, I found out that I was good at pole vaulting.
I know. I saw the photo in your other room.
At 81, I'm still doing it. Why give up when you learn something complicated like that?
Give me a pole vaulting lesson, because it's the only sport at school that we were never allowed to do, because none of the teachers were,
Oh, well, when I was at school, though, we weren't allowed to pole vault because somebody in 1923 had speared themselves and died, with a bamboo pole. And I was easily the best pole vaulter in the whole public schools, and I never got to compete. But I competed for the local athletic club.
Yeah, I saw the photos. Actually, I'm going to take a picture of that photo and I'll pop it up on the screen now so you can see. Wills soon topped all the house cricket statistics. At the bat, he was described as a punisher with a sound defence. However, in an era where stylish stroke play was expected of amateurs, Wills was said to have had no style at all. So, stylish stroke play was the way that the English batted. What does having no style at all mean, you think?
It means he was able to adapt to any ball, that he didn't have a ritual process. So he
didn't think about the shot before he played it, you mean? It was just natural?
He didn't think about it. He just played the ball on its merits, that he had good hand-eye coordination, and that he could just wait and respond however he wanted to hit the ball to all parts of the ground. The idea in those days of English was to lean forward and prod the ball,
Yes, and play stylishly, sir.
and they would canter off for a run, whereas I would imagine Wills would have been off in a real hurry, and that he would have been ungainly according to them. But he was so adept and adaptable, because of his prior experiences.
Mm. Well, we all are. So
you
can't say that didn't influence his ability.
You can't divorce yourself from the whole upbringing.
How do you bowl? How is your first round arm bowl the batsman out?
Yeah.
Like, that's amazing.
Well, again, it's his hand-eye coordination. He's used to throwing things. He knows distances, velocities, all that sort of stuff. It's all built in proprioceptive memory, muscle memory.
Probably why he gets called for throwing so often as his older years.
Yeah.
So at school, beer is served regularly to the students.
Well, of course, the water in England was rubbish.
Yeah. Why is that? What was that because of?
The groundwater that they have there, and the pollution. It was just Australia. We're spoiled. We have the purest water in the world, but also you got a lot of limestone, places, so the water becomes very hard. In places like England and all that, and
of course they've got all these cows and sheep pooping.
Yeah, that's right.
Just like you said earlier.
Yeah.
In 1851, he's now 16 years old. He's feeling homesick, and he asks his father to send him native weapons, to which his father gathered and sent to England. Interestingly, he also sent 2 black swans that died in the shape of question marks during transit. What's this significance with the black swans, Jim?
Well, just like the unicorn, it was, to Europeans, it was a mythical creature. It didn't exist. And when people got to Australia, there's only black swans in Australia, and people were incredulous at that. And they were shipping black swans to Europe because nobody would believe, let alone believe, the platypuses and things like that. They thought that they'd taken the bill of a duck and, the web feet of,
mashed it together
and sewed it all together, and the people, were looking for the stitches when they sent, platypuses there, and echidnas and all that sort of stuff. They could understand echidnas a bit more like a porcupine, but black swans were not supposed to exist. They're supposed to be mythical,
like a unicorn.
Yeah.
So at 16, he's 5'8". He's already outgrown his dad, and he's tipping the scales at 9 1/4 stone.
Now, just remember, back at that time, the average height of an Englishman was 5'3".
Really?
Yeah,
right.
They were runts. Yeah, the ships, Lord Nelson, and all these admirals were only 5'3". So at 5'8", Tom was a strongly built, tall youth.
What's 9 1/4 stone in kilos?
9 1/4 stone.
I've got it written here. I'm just going to test you.
It's 65 something like that.
58, pretty close.
58, yeah.
So he's 58 kilos. In 6 months, he scored 839 runs, more than 5 times that of the nearest rival at rugby.
Well, that is amazing, isn't it?
He's good. He's really good. Yeah. 1852 now, he's 17. In April, he joins the Rugby School 11 and makes his debut at Lord's against the Marylebone Cricket Club. A few months later, he takes a match-high 12 wickets. While his bowling proved vital that year in establishing rugby as the greatest public school in English cricket, anonymous critics in the press started to say that he ought to be no-balled for throwing. Now, look, do you remember the first time that you bowled a cricket ball?
Yeah, I was rubbish.
Yeah, well, I still remember it because the teacher told me off. He goes, "That's a throw. That's not a bowl."
Yeah.
Your natural inclination is to throw, right?
Well, throwing yonnies.
Yeah.
Skipping stones across a lake,
Yeah. So he gets called for. They're saying he's starting to throw the ball. So the rugby coach, John Lillywhite, is his name. he's Tom's mentor and the umpire of the game, who was considered an authority at bowling, came to his protege's defence, rescuing him from further scandal. On November 2nd, in the annual Athletics Carnival, he won the 100-yard flat race, and he was noted as the best kick of a football and the longest throw of a cricket ball. The events were as follows: the 200-yard flat race, the hurdles race at the same length, a quarter-mile hurdles race, a 1.25-mile flat race, running wide jump. Who knows what that is?
They used to have a standing long jump and a running long jump.
Right, but what does wide jump mean?
Well, it's the
long jump.
Yeah, long jump.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I saw you in your room there too. You hold the triple jump, the veterans triple jump record or something.
The over 55s.
The over 55. You broke the record. Yeah, that's really cool. The standing high jump, vaulting, throwing of the cricket ball, hand fives. Don't know what that is.
What?
It's called hand fives.
Oh, that's a handball game that was played in the public schools. It's like squash with your hands.
Place kick and drop, swimming and diving. So these are all the things. Now, I'm not exactly sure if he won them all, but we know that for sure that he won the best kick. But the kick was two things. It was a place kick and a drop kick.
Yeah.
So place kick is on the ground. Drop kick is like what we would say in AFL, or just dropping it.
Yeah, no. It's the drop kick. You drop the ball and kick it as it hits the ground.
Yeah, they don't really do them in the AFL anymore. But
no, they don't. Ron Barassi banned them.
Did he really?
Yeah. He said
they go so far though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Dave McNamara kicked 90 metres or something like that.
There's an old Fitzroy player, I don't know if you know him, named Jimmy Tadgell. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
I think he was Fitzroy. My grandpa's dad was good friends with him, and he used to, at training, he'd send grandpa over the back fence, and then he would just do drop kicks at goal and kick the ball over the fence, and grandpa would grab him, put him in his Gladstone bag and take off, and he had a footy for a couple of weeks. Oh, God. So in football matches at rugby at that time, when the ball was run in for a try at goal, Tom was always the one summoned to kick. So how did he become such a good kick in less than a year of playing the game? He's the longest kick, and this idea of just, his natural ability, you still have to have some form of like
muscle memory.
Yeah. Well, not muscle memory. Yeah. I mean, you have to have some form of practice before you get good at something.
Well, that's right.
But he's automatically amazing.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because in the Margaret concept, the person who kicks the ball the highest is considered the best player.
Yeah.
And has the honor of burying it in the ground the next day. So this idea of him being the best kick at school is him being the best player at Margaret.
Yeah, well, exactly right, And in Marngrook, the object of the ball is to kick it high, and it only takes a slight adjustment, to kick it long, because you've got to kick it high to kick it long anyway.
You do, yeah.
It's just all part of the same skill set.
On the honour board, on the cricket honour board, I should say, in 1852 of the Rugby 11, Tom's name is now on the board, so he's part of the team. I think as you go up on the board, it's like working your way to captain. Yeah. I think they probably rank them. They're English, they love to rank everything. 1853, he's 18 years old now. Wills went on to play with and attracted praise from the leading cricketers of the age, including a man named Alfred Minn. Now, Alfred Minn was an English first-class cricketer during the game's round arm era. He was a genuine all-rounder, being both an attacking right-hand batsman and a formidable right-arm fast bowler. Cricket writer John Woodcock ranked him as the fourth greatest cricketer of all time. Simon Wilde wrote that the speed at which Minn bowled and his life-size personality captured the imagination of the public in a way no cricketer had ever before. Sounds like Tom.
It does. He had a role model.
He had a role model there, and this he's obviously attracting praise from these people. And when you get praise as a student from someone who's older than you, it makes you want to be, better
and repeat what you've done.
Yeah, and you look at someone who does something great, you're like, oh, I want to be like him.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. He ended 1853 the cricket season with the best bowling average. In the Hare and Hounds race later that year, he was detained by French lessons and started late. He came second in the race. His time was the fastest of all the hounds and 5.5 minutes faster than the quickest hare. So he's lightning on his feet. Just for the people listening, hare and hounds?
Oh, hare and hounds is you have hares, the rabbits, you take off first and you've got to complete a course. And the hounds take off and you've got to catch up to them.
Yeah, you get like a time period, right? And the hares are usually the younger boys.
Yes, that's right.
And they drop, did I read that they drop paper or something
along
the way?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, you when you do it across country, you have to spread bits of paper, shreds of paper.
So they know where they're going.
So they know where they're going.
I think I was reading that some of the paper at rugby school in the rugby school book would blow into the farmers' paddocks.
Yeah.
So they would run into the farmers' paddocks to follow it, but the farmers didn't want the kids in the paddocks, so they would shoot at them with the saltpeter guns.
Which sting.
Oh, yeah, they sting, yeah. So his name on the cricket honour board is now listed at 3rd after 2 years of being there. So he's moving up the ranks quick. That same year, he received an offer from William Clark, one of his heroes, to join the All England 11 cricket tour. At 18 years old, he's playing first-class English cricket, travelling around the English countryside and earning money as a cricketer. Now, William Clark was an English cricketer and a team manager who played first-class cricket from 1826 to 1855. He founded, managed and captained the All England 11. He is described as one of those certain figures who, in history of cricket, stands like milestones along the way. So this is his hero. So he's gathering all of these different people who are showboats and amazing cricketers, and they're putting teams together.
Yes.
All things that he does later in his life.
Yes.
Yeah. On the 1st of May, Horatio wrote a letter to Tom about his indigenous friend, Pussycat. Pussycat, black boy, went off to Mount William with... I should preface this. This is a letter that Horatio wrote Tom while he was at school.
Yeah.
Pussycat went off to Mount William with teams a few days ago. The day before he left, he said to your mother, "Where Tom? Tom no Quamby here. When Quamby Tom?" Evidently much surprised at not meeting you, he continued, "You show me Tom," meaning the daguerreotype likeness, which is like daguerreotypes, those old cameras, yeah?
Yeah, that's right.
He gazed upon it a long time. The old blacks, your friends, were fond of seeing it. They told me to send you up to them as soon as possible. This is interesting. He gazed upon it a long time.
Yeah.
So he's sitting there just looking at a photo of Tom. So he wouldn't do that unless they had some form
of strong relationship. He was missing Tom, and they were obviously friends, and obviously spent a lot of time together, as kids.
Yeah. So it just, again, cements his place in their culture.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. 1854 now, he's 19 years old. His hero, William Clark, once again invites him to join the All England 11, but he has to go to school, so he's not allowed to play. In November, he plays in the annual Students versus Old Boys matches. In referring to the game, the Bell's Life in London was quoted as saying, "Wills, to the admiration of spectators, rose above the swarm of boys and displayed an eel-like agility, which baffled all the efforts of his opponents to retain him in their grasp." What do you think this is a description of?
What I see this describing is that Tom takes the initiative and leaps on the other players' backs, catches the ball in flight as it's thrown in, and then hits the ground running.
Hence the eel-like agility.
Yeah, that's right. And they're all nonplussed because nobody's ever done it before.
Because it's to get your name in this paper from just a Students versus Old Boys match, you must have done something amazing.
That's right.
Like, because to be noted about.
And I think that it's taken another 100 years or so, but the line out for rugby, where they throw the ball in and hoist people up, that's just what I see it describing. Yeah. Him leaping on other players' backs, catching the ball, then nicking off up the field before they can lay a glove on him.
Well, that's the interesting thing. This why they would, to the admiration of spectators, meaning he did something and that they all just went,
they were
wow!
all awestruck. Yes.
So maybe and then to use the words "rose above the swarm of boys." So a swarm would, I'm just trying to pull apart your argument. So a swarm would mean that they were all congregated together.
Yeah,
So
waiting for the throw-in.
possibly, yeah, for the throw-in. But definitely that could be one of those. But to rise or rose above, that's what they said, obviously means he's getting above this swarm. So he must be on top of them in some sense. And then just this eel-like agility, which baffled them, would be like,
where's he gone? What's he doing?
You know, because later on in December, it says here that the Bell's Life once again mentioned Tom. And they said on the school side, the play of Wills was excellent. He quite dodged the other side with his slimy tricks, which drew applause from many spectators. So eel-like agility, slimy, moving, rising above, you know, he's quite gifted. And
he's using skills that nobody else has got.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he is. It just seems to come out of nowhere. And to be... And he's obviously doing something that they're like... It's baffling people that you've used the word baffled and drawing applause, and so he's getting notoriety for playing this style, this way. You know, Tom's name now on the Rugby 11 cricket honour board is listed at second. Next year of his life, he's 20, which is interesting because normally you finish school when you're 18, 19, but he got there later.
No, quite often it was a universities were very, very selective, very few people. And it was just like primary schools often went to grade 8 and the secondary schools, you know, took in 19, 20-year-olds.
Yeah, okay.
And I think the rule in the Victorian public schools, which you couldn't have a record or whatnot if you were over 21.
So he's 20. He becomes the captain of rugby and his name is now... at the top of the honour board.
Oh, there you go.
So, interesting fact. This is just a random one that I saw in Greg DeMore's book. It says Charles Darwin's son, William Erasmus Darwin, was in Tom's French class.
Oh, there you go.
Tom was the dominant bowler and batsman for the season. As captain, he was now also the bookkeeper, keeping scores, organising fixtures, and settling cricket accounts. So he's learning the business of cricket as well.
Yeah.
In his final week of school, he captained the Rugby 11 against Marlborough College. The following day, he played his last game of cricket for rugby as captain, defeating Marylebone Cricket Club at Lord's. In June, he left rugby school. The Evans House notes in farewell to Tom, they referred to him as captain of the school 11 and simply the school bowler. So he must have been good.
Yeah.
In July, Tom meets a future Australian counterpart, William Hammersley, in a cricket match. Tom's playing for Kent and William's playing for Surrey. Hammersley remembered Tom as that young fellow from rugby who plays with a 10-pound bat and hits terrific. The bats in those days wouldn't have been knocked in or sprung or anything. It just would have been a lump of wood, yeah?
No, just lumps of willow.
Can you imagine hitting like those hard cricket balls with just that? Like,
yeah.
It's crazy. So now we're up to 1856 and 1857. He's 21/22 years old. He remains in England for the first 15 months before returning to Australia. He visited rugby on numerous occasions, playing cricket, football, and participated in Hare and Hounds just as if he'd never left. So it sounds like he's like, I don't want to go. I just want to go back to school and play games again, you know? He made his way around England, playing cricket for the Gentlemen of Kent, Cambridge University, and several rugby teams. Although never enrolled as a student, much to the dismay of his father. Remember, he wanted him to go to Cambridge and be a lawyer.
A lawyer.
Yeah. Tom was now measuring 5'10" and tipping the scales at 11 stone 2 pounds.
Right.
Want to guess what that is?
74 right.
kilos. Yeah. In a Cambridge versus Oxford cricket match, the biggest game of the year, Cambridge claimed to be one man short. And who should be waiting in the wings to fill in? Tom Wills. With his assistance, Cambridge won for the first time in 4 years. In June, Tom stepped onto the rugby field for the last time, playing for the Marylebone Cricket Club. He made 22 runs in the first innings and hit the ball over the cricket pavilion for 6 runs. They won by 9 wickets.
Oh, gee.
Yeah. He then met professional English cricketer Charles Lawrence, and they travelled to Ireland together in August. He played every game on offer for a month and was remembered more for the pranks he played rather than his skills as a cricketer. Charles Lawrence was an English cricketer who played for Scotland, Ireland, and England and settled in Australia after touring with the English side in 61 and 62. He played for Surrey, England, captained and coached New South Wales, but is most notable as the captain coach of the Aboriginal cricket team that toured England in 1868, the first ever tour of England by an Australian team.
Yep. And the first Australian team to beat the Poms.
They beat the Poms while they were over there?
Oh, yeah. They played dozens of matches. And
I don't think they beat the actual English 11, but they beat a lot of the county clubs.
Oh, they did. Yeah. Well, I refer to Poms generically.
Yeah, okay, yeah. No.
Before that, an Australian team had never beaten an English team. Before that.
Wow.
The 1868 Aboriginal team was the first Australian team to beat an English team.
Actually, in your room, I think I saw this morning the poster from the paper. Is it from the newspaper of the time?
No, I made that up.
You made that. It's really good. I'll put a picture of that on the screen as well. After exhausting his funds and having his father pay all of his debts, he was shipped back to Melbourne on the 19th of October. The journey took half as long as the first time. Ships are getting better. Tom arrived home on December 26th. When he first stepped off the boat, it was a very different Melbourne than he remembered. The gold rush had begun and the city had grown exponentially. Must have been crazy coming back after leaving as a kid and then coming back and going, where did it
was
come
totally from? Different. Totally different. You know, Melbourne became the richest city in the British Empire, and tribal life was virtually extinguished in the time that he was away.
So at this stage, his family has moved from Lexington to Bellevue near Geelong, where they built a new homestead. It had a dairy along with chickens, many cats and dogs running about the place. Do you think, though, even though they're living in Bellevue now, Tom would have gone back to visit Pussycat?
Oh, I think so, yes. He had his lifelong friends there.
So before Tom's arrival, the Victorians had lost the first intercolonial cricket match and they had it in mind to recruit him for the next one. A practice match on New Year's Day was organised for the Victorian cricketers, and when Tom entered the club, he met William Hammersley again. And upon entering the ground for training, it was said he did so in a manner of one who fancied himself. He was dressed in his Isingari jacket, a dazzling red, gold and black, the same colours as the Birds of Paradise from Lords. A large crowd gathered to watch him play, and Wills and Hammersley opened the bowling, and Tom stole runs from dull-witted fieldsmen. With his awkward batting style, they're still talking about that, he made 57 not out. It's interesting at this time because it wasn't a 6-ball over, it was 4.
4, yes.
So he's taking all these wickets, but he's only doing it on, 3/4 of what we get now. The press suggested that with Tom's help, they would be victorious, or the Victorians would be victorious, in the next intercolonial match. The game took place on the Domain, public land that stretched between Parliament House and the bays of Sydney Harbour, and Parliament was suspended for the day. I love that. They're just like, we're playing cricket, shut Parliament down.
Yeah. Tom Wills gives me the impression that he would have made a marvellous T20 cricketer.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Tom took 10 wickets, but was bowled out after making only a single run. So the bowler, John McComb, bowled fast underhand, a style considered old-fashioned at the time. So he's used to all these round-arm deliveries.
In other words, grubbers.
Yeah, he did what was that guy's name? Trevor Chappell?
Yeah, that's right. He did grubbers.
Oh, my dad used to do that when we'd be playing in the backyard cricket. If I needed like a 6 or need to hit the fence to win, he'd just bowl me and Trevor and he'd go, I'm going to give you the Trevor Chappell, and he'd bowl it along. The Victorians were cocky in the game, but they lost by 65 runs, and rumours went around that they were pretty much drunk on the field. The Bell's Life in Victoria and the Argus newspapers spoke of Tom bowling sparklers, rippers, fizzers, trimmers and shooters. Balls skimmed and shaved, flew quickly and trimmed the bails over the slow and sometimes over others slow and sometimes dropped mid-flight, a la William Clark, his hero, leaving the batsman perplexed at being bowled. Now, I found an article written by William Hammersley years later, and he described, because I was like, what is a shooter? What is a fizzer? Like, what are these things? And I found a description from William Hammersley, the guy he played with, of what a shooter was. He says, under the old style, the horizontal delivery, shooters were very common. Now, a shooter is a rarity, and it must be conceded that a shooter is a most dangerous ball. A very fatal one indeed. What ball could be more difficult to play than one pitching a good length, a little wide, say off the leg stump, and shooting across to the off? Such a ball is now rarely, if ever, seen. So round arm bowling, it's sort of like this is the one where you probably get done for throwing the most, because you're pitching it off leg
Yeah.
stump and then flinging it over the other
But
side.
also you think about the way the body movements involved. If you're coming round arm, your whole body is going to twist to the left. Whereas
you more
modern
fling.
bowling, it's straight up and down.
Yeah.
Whereas so therefore you're going to have a violent twist of the body, which is going to make the ball shoot from right to left.
Yeah, because it's coming from that angle to come in. Yeah.
Look, I think they would be all to do with the grip of the ball and whether you're putting backspin on the ball or side spin, that sort of stuff. And I think they're just, you would need to do some more research to be able to find out.
Well, that's why I was so happy with myself when I found out what a shooter was. It makes sense. It's shooting across the wicket, you know.
Yeah.
Tom featured in the press frequently, and he wrote no less than 50 letters to the local newspapers. The MCC wanted Tom to play with them, even though he'd played with Corio Cricket Club previously. He didn't care whoever he played for. He had no loyalty and just wanted to play cricket, which is exactly what he did when he was in England. His first summer in Melbourne, he boarded at 165 Victoria Parade with his aunt, Miss Jane Harrison, the mother of his cousin Colden. Now we're up to 1858 to 1859. He's 23, 24 years old. In September, Tom was elected honorary secretary of the MCC, taking over from William Hammersley. A week later, his father Horatio was elected as a member. He's like, "Hey, Dad, I'm the secretary. Want to come in?" A month after being named honorary secretary of the MCC, he was playing with the Collingwood Cricket Club against Heidelberg. Tom took 7 wickets and won the game for him. From then on, when Tom walked on the field, the cry of "all bets are off" was heard around the ground. The bookies must have just hated it when he played.
And I would suggest that the word honorary secretary is a little bit of a misnomer, because there would have been a deal associated with his playing cricket that included being honorary secretary unpaid.
Yeah. The next intercolonial cricket match took place on January 11th, 1858. Tom batted 7th and made 12 runs, and Victoria made 59 in total. He took 5 wickets and New South Wales made 57 runs, so they won. Tom chose not to wear leg guards and was smashed in the face by an underarm pitch that bounced off an imperfection in the turf, rendering him unconscious. After several minutes, he rose and then batted again for another 2 hours, ending with the innings with 49 not out. The Victorians made a staggering 238 runs, a figure not thought possible in colonial cricket.
Yes.
On the third day, Tom bowled to the New South Wales captain and hit him in the groin. He dropped to the ground and was carried from the field. Victoria won the match.
Right.
Yeah. In the last week of February 1858, Tom and the Victorian team headed to Tasmania to play the Launceston Cricket Club. They won by a full innings. The following week, the team travelled to Hobart. Tom bowled 3 balls into a Tasmanian batsman's leg, and he was unable to run between the wickets. Tom's father, Horatio, decided at this point that after 3 years in Parliament, he was done with it. He wasn't made for it. Upon returning from Tasmania, the MCC now had become broke, and Tom, as secretary, was blamed for the lack of funds. On the 10th of July, 1858, Tom wrote a letter to the Bell's Life that changed Australian sport forever. Do you know what it was called, Jim?
A winter practice.
Yeah. Sir, I'll see if we can do it in my... That's another question I had, actually. Would he have had an English accent?
No. Australians had by that time developed their own accent.
Yeah.
But he might have picked up a few English inflections
That's
in
what I'm
his
thinking.
time.
Yeah, so I'm feeling like he would be slightly muddled in the way that his accent is sort of coming out. It's a little bit of a kind of a, for lack of a better word, a mongrel accent. Yeah. Okay, so I'll do it in my best British accent. Sir, now that cricket has been put aside for some few months to come, the cricketers have assumed somewhat of a chrysalis nature. For a time, it's only true. But at length will again burst forth in all their varied hues. Rather than allow this state of torpor to creep over them and stifle their new supple limbs, why can they not, I say, form a football club and form a committee of 3 or more to draw up a code of laws? If a club of this sort were got up, it would be of vast benefit to any cricket ground to be trampled upon, and would make the turf quite firm and durable. besides which it would keep those who are inclined to become stout from having their joints encased in useless superabundant flesh. If it is not possible to form a football club, why should not these young men who have adopted this newborn country for their motherland, why, I say, do they not form themselves into a rifle club, so as, at any rate, they may be some day called upon to aid their adopted land against a tyrant's band, that may some day pop upon us when we least expect a foe at our very doors. Surely, our young cricketers are not afraid of the crack of the rifle when they face so courageously the leathern sphere, and would disgrace no one to learn, in time, how to defend his country and his hearth. A firm heart, a steady hand, and a quick eye are all that are required, and, with practice, all these may be attained. Trusting that someone will take up this matter and form either of the above clubs, or at any rate some athletic games, I remain yours truly, T.W. Wills.
It's interesting that the timing of it, the strategy, it seems to me not to be a letter that's just written on a whim, that he's actually constructed what he said, very carefully, and that he'd already discussed this with other people. I get that impression, that it was a product of a groupthink as well as him. But it's interesting, he was also an excellent rifle shot, that he didn't mind promoting games that he was good at.
Yeah, well, why would you promote something you weren't good at? I guess if you want to be the guy who's winning all the time. I did read in Greg DeMoore's book that letter was a carbon copy of, not a carbon copy, but pretty close to another letter that was in the Bell's Life in England as well. So he's Greg said he kind of ripped it off a little bit, but at the same time, it's got him. Well, it's got him in it.
Yeah, plagiarism is accepted.
So on the 6th of August, 1858, a notice appears in the Argus newspaper advertising a game of football being played in the Richmond paddock. A grand football match will be played this day between the Scotch College and the Church of England Grammar Schools near the MCG ground, 40 aside. The game to commence at 1:30 o'clock. I love how they put half. Luncheon at the pavilion.
1:30.
Yeah, it's 1:30, but like, why would you write 1 and then 1/2? Like, yeah, it's 1:30 o'clock. This game is considered to be the first ever game of Australian rules football. Now, Jim, you and I both have a history with this game, but your history is more interesting. So let's go with that first.
Okay. Well, I went to Scotch College, and from 1954 to 1958, and it so happened that the 1958 was the year of the centenary of that first football match.
Match.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so we were all told the history of the game, and I immediately recognised Tom Wills' prior experience as mirroring that of my great grandfather.
Did they talk about him being with Aboriginal kids?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
He was well known to the natives.
Is that what they said? Yeah.
And all this sort of stuff,
Yeah.
and established close friendships with the local natives, all that sort of stuff. It was I think he was born at Gundagai and all, like they traced his history, and I immediately recognised that this was parallel, as I said, to my great-grandfather's own life experience, and realised that his involvement with Aboriginal people must have been similar. So the seed was laid right then and there at the 100th, anniversary of the game, that Tom Wills' association with Aboriginal people was linked to the creation of Australian rules football, and that was deeply embedded in my mind right then.
It's funny because that game's actually how I met you.
Yeah, that's right.
I was writing a school play about Tom Wills that we were going to put on later in the year, and I went to that game. Got invited to that game by our coordinator.
No, that was the 1958 game.
No, I know that one, but I'm talking
Yeah.
about the one where I met you.
Yeah, that's right.
Which
That was the
was
100. Well, was it?
No, was it? I don't think it was a milestone game, but it was just
No,
that
it was
game.
just that game.
That
yeah.
game is the biggest game of the year at Melbourne Grammar and Scotch College.
Yeah.
And each team always wants to win. It draws a huge crowd on that beautiful Scotch Oval. And I'm sitting next to our principal, and I think Eddie Maguire was sitting next to him as well. And
Yeah.
we're all sitting there watching the game, and it was half time, so you just sit there and you know have a chat and stuff. And then all of a sudden, I hear this voice, and it says Marngrook, and there's this guy on the oval's got a microphone, and he's teaching the young Scotch kids how to play Marngrook, and you're telling everyone about the game, and it was you.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm doing a play on this. I need to catch him. So I didn't go across the oval, because if you walk on the Scotch Oval, you get shot. Basically, it's like it's more beautiful than the MCG. That ground, it's so amazing. And I chased you through the crowd until I think I got to you when you got to your car. And I remember having a chat to you there, and you gave me a whole bunch of books that you'd written, and I actually used a lot of it to put the play together. So yeah, that's kind of how.
Yeah, just as an old Scotch boy, I sort of offered to contribute, and a couple of times I've been asked to give talks to the assembly on, reconciliation, things like that. I had been wanting to introduce the game to older kids. I'd done a few with younger kids in primary school, but the younger kids sort of didn't really understand what I was trying to do. And it wasn't until I was introducing the Marngrook game to Scotch kids and the older kids, grasped hold of the idea and were able to execute the skills. One of the young there's a few Aboriginal players that were in the Scotch team, one of whom is playing for Bulldogs now, Ugle Hagen. He was there, and he was pretty good too. He had natural skills in Marngrook.
I think I remember that, because they were all jumping all over each other while they were playing the game with you. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
So, the Scotch game. So, 2 umpires were chosen for this match. Melbourne Grammar chose Tom Wills, and Scotch chose a guy named Dr. John McAdam, who was the chemistry teacher there. Dr. John Bromby noted in his diary the 3 days of the event and what he called the grand football match. Dr. Bromby was the first principal of Melbourne Grammar in 1858. And he wrote this: August 7th, Saturday. He probably have a British accent too. Football match with the Scotch College, 40 aside. It is the oldest educational institution in the colony. They number 187, we only 113, meaning the number of students. They had 4 masters on the field, we only 3. The match was to be 2 games out of 3. The game was fiercely contested for 3 hours when the Scotch scored a goal. After lunch, our boys equalised, and it was 1 apiece. The playing field was next to the MCG, stretching from the fence at the Richmond Cricket Ground to the Parade Hotel, some 800 yards long. The boys dodged trees and rocks as they played. When a high kick sent the ball up into those pesky gums, the boys climbed up to get them back down. The game was fiercely contested for 3 hours. When the sun went down, the scores were 1-1. August 21st, Saturday. Continuation of the grand football match with the Scotch College. Thomas Smith, a teacher of the classics at Scots, was tempestuous on the football field, employing the technique of rabbiting. When our boys were running with the ball, he would bend down in front of them to trip them over. Players were tripped, elbowed, and tackled. One Scotch boy loved jumping on the backs of the taller boys to bring them down, and most of the boys were more interested in how many players they could trip than trying to get the ball. After a hard struggle for 3 hours, the game was adjourned for a fortnight. The boys were so exhausted that they were obliged to go to bed an hour earlier than usual. September 4th, the grand football match was contested with great vehemence. Vehemence meaning aggression?
Yes, viciousness almost.
Yeah. O'Mullen got the ball down near the MCG fence and ran round the east side of the cricket ground amongst the trees, and then came back surreptitiously and kicked a goal. The Scotch boys complained, and Tom Wills decided that past the cricket ground fence was out of bounds, and the goal was disallowed. The match was ultimately drawn when the sun went down, the last of the season. It is a feather in our cap that so young a school can maintain its ground against the oldest and most numerous in the colony. So several games of football were conducted. throughout 1858. Players moved freely amongst the teams and the boys and men all played together. Can you imagine doing that now? Boys and men playing football together? Even then, like how rough it was.
Yeah. And playing 3 hours and stopping at sunset.
Yeah, it's interesting that was when they stopped, yeah. On the last Saturday in September, Tom played in the final game of football recorded in 1858, captaining the Melbourne team against South Yarra. At either end of the ground stood 2 goalposts. Atop of each post was a cotton handkerchief that waved as flags. The football was a sphere, neatly stitched, and each side had exactly 26 players. South Yarra wore blue shirts, Melbourne wore whatever they could, and they all wore boots and full-length trousers. Can you imagine playing footy in full-length trousers? It's crazy. In a full page of verse about the game, the Journal of the Melbourne Punch mentioned only one player by name, Tom Wills. Tom charged towards the goal, leading a phalanx. Is it phalanx of men?
Phalanx, yeah.
Yeah, that's like
an arrowhead.
Like a close-knit group of people.
That's right, yeah.
Melbourne kicked the only goal to win the match and the football season was over. On the morning of the last football match, Bell's Life Victoria reported that Tom Wills was no longer the honorary secretary of the MCC. The president, D.S. Campbell, was furious at his lack of compliance. 150 years later, the only minute book that cannot be located within the club is from his time as secretary. In September 1858, Tom was unanimously elected as the president of the Collingwood Cricket Club. In January 1859, the next intercolonial match was to be played on the Domain in Sydney. So they must be playing one in Melbourne, one in Sydney.
Yeah.
On the first day of the game, Tom dislocated the top joint of his middle finger while attempting a catch. Apparently unaffected, he took 11 wickets for the match and made 49 with the bat. He bowled, the New South Wales captain, on the first ball of the last day, and the Victorians won by 2 wickets. And that was obviously when they bowled 4 ball overs, so that's pretty impressive. On the 17th of May 1859, the first known written rules of Australian football were agreed upon at the Parade Hotel. 4 men decided the rules on that day. Tom Wills, William Hammersley, James Thomson, and Thomas Smith. Thomas Smith was a classics master at Scotch, and he recalled the day almost 20 years after. Mr. Wills, Mr. Hammersley, and myself walked up the slope to the Melbourne Cricket Ground to the Parade Hotel and formed ourselves into a committee, is what he said. Hammersley's recollection is a little bit different, and it says, one day after a severe fight in the old Richmond paddock, when blood had been drawn freely and some smart raps exchanged and a leg broken, it occurred to some of us that if we had rules to play under, it would be better. Tom Wills suggested the rugby rules, but nobody understood them except himself. And I've just got a note here that when he played rugby at the rugby school, it's so funny to say that, rugby at the rugby school, there were 33 separate rules for the game. So hard to understand a lot of them, especially when you read them now with the old jargon that they're written in. And as was the usual result, we adjourned to the Parade Hotel close by to think the matter over. This we did with the following result. Several drinks and the formation of a committee consisting of Wills, myself, J.B. Thomson and Football Smith, as he was termed, a master at Scotch College, a rattling fine player and a splendid kick, but a very peppery temper. Had red hair. When you see a picture of him, he does. He kind of disappears too. Like he's an interesting figure, but yeah, it's not about him. We decided to draw up a simple code of rules, as few as possible, so that they could be quickly understood. We did so, and the result was the rules then drawn up to form the basis of the present code, under which the game is universally played in Victoria and most other parts of Australia. I feel sure that neither the rugby or the association rules will ever supplant them. Now,
and by association, they mean soccer rules.
Yeah, English association. Yeah. Thomas Smith, I found a quote from him that says, "The Melbourne Football Club originated with Mr. Wills, Mr. Hammersley, and myself as we walked from the cricket ground. Mr. Thomson was not present, but joined afterwards at the Parade Hotel." J.B. Thomson, and this is an interesting one. The Rugby, Eton, Harrow, and Winchester rules at the time, I think in 1859, came under our consideration. The outcome being that we all unanimously agreed that regulations which suited schoolboys well enough would not be patiently tolerated by grown men. And that was from 1870s. So he's saying Rugby, Eton, Harrow, Winchester. Tom Wills is quoted as saying this in an unpublished letter. "We didn't play rugby rules because the ground in Australia is too hard and men could be injured if thrown down, so we changed the rules to suit ourselves." J.B. Thomson, "The Eton and rugby laws, to the writer, they are in an unknown tongue, and therefore must be excused for attempting to put them into vernacular English. He also said a code of laws drawn up for and in use by the Melbourne Football Club has been pretty generally adopted. I make no apology for introducing them into this work. And that's the Cricketer's Guide from 1859. Another one from JB Thompson says, football, as played in Victoria, is now fit to run alone. I have accordingly omitted the rugby and Eton rules from this guide because we seem to have agreed upon a code of our own, which, to a considerable extent, combines the merits while excluding the vices of both. And the last one's from Wills, and he says, and taken in, all they, meaning the rules, worked well, and were in fact better carried out than the present laws, many of which seem to be quietly ignored. So as far as influences go, we've got JB Thompson and William Hammersley both went to Cambridge University, where they had their own brand of football, and the original rules were recorded in 1845, and that was the same time they attended it. So what I'm trying to say by that is what you play under is usually what you like or what you know. Yeah.
And they seem to have made a conscious effort to create a new game. Right? You know, they say let's look at what's good about other games. Not much, and so let's shape our rules about that.
Yeah, and obviously they're all going to have different opinions and different backgrounds. But those guys going to Cambridge University, their brand of football. Thomas Smith, he went to Trinity in Dublin, Trinity College, I should say, and they played with the same rules as rugby school. And Tom Wills was from rugby school, and he played under the rules published in 1851 because they didn't change them until about 53, 54. But like they said up there, they said that they looked at the Eton field game, the Harrow School, and the Winchester School as influences. But in my research, none of those match the rules.
No.
So the similarities between the sets of rules are as follows. The kickoff at the start of the game. So the captains of each side shall toss for choice of goal. The side losing shall kick off from the centre point between the goals. Okay. And then the Cambridge rules, which they said wasn't an influence, is nearly word for word. At the commencement of play, the ball is kicked off from the middle of the ground. After every goal, there should be a kick off in the same way. So that's heavily there. Rugby, rule number 1 was kick off from the middle must be a place kick. That's all they wrote. So very similar. Someone really wants you on the phone, Jim. Do you want to go and answer it?
Better, I suppose so.
That's okay.
I don't know whether I'll get there.
No, we'll come back. All right, so Eton we're up to. The Eton rule for kicks off at the start of the game doesn't exist. Harrow, the ball must be kicked from the middle of the ground, but halfway between the two bases. So they didn't have goals. They had 4 spots on the ground. You had to get it in the space.
Yeah.
Winchester doesn't have it. Now, Marngrook, very interestingly, from Beveridge, is where how do I say it?
The Lyore
goes in and kicks the ball up in the middle.
Yep.
Now, this idea of kicking forwards and backwards is interesting because that's the one distinction between the two games. The football's trying to move towards a goal, and whereas Marngrook's trying to get it up in the air. William Thomas, he said that it's given to the foremost player and kicked up in the air as well.
Yep.
So all of the games,
a ball up,
like a ball up, but I think does he kick it? Does not throw it as a white man, but drops it at the same time and kicks it with his foot. Yeah, so it's like a ball up, but they're just kicking it with their feet. Imagine if umpires did that today; that'd be cool. So every game, including Marngrook, except for Winchester and Eton, had the kickoff at the start of the game. Scoring a goal. So score a goal must be kicked fairly between the posts without touching them or any person or player on either side. The goal must be kicked between the flag post is the Cambridge rule, and the one previous was the Melbourne rule. The rugby rules had rules 16 to 20, all about a goal. Try at goal. The ball must be touched between the goalposts and may be brought up to either of them, but not between them. So they have to, when they're having a shot at goal, it has to be brought to where the post is. The ball, when punted, must be within, and when caught, without the line of goal. So I think you had to kick it through the goals, but someone of your team had to catch it on the other side as well.
Yeah.
The ball must be place kicked and not dropped, and if in touch, 2 hands, the try will be lost. There's so many rules for goals. It shall be a goal if the ball go over the bar, whether it touch it or not, without having touched the dress or person of any player, but no player may stand on the goal bar to interrupt it going
So,
over.
in other words, you can't get a goal if it's touched.
That's right, yeah. And no goal may be kicked from touch. So touch in this instance means out of bounds, is that
Out of bounds, yeah.
yeah. The Eaton rule, a goal is gained when the ball is kicked between them, provided it is not over the level of the top of them. So they didn't have a crossbar,
No,
but it was imaginary.
an imaginary line.
Yeah. Harrow had bases, not goals, and Winchester had behinds, conversions, and goals that all scored 1 point, 2 points, and 3 points. So they all have an element of goals, but obviously the goal of Marngrook is just to get it the most,
Yeah,
and kick it the most. Yeah. The size of the field and the goals for the Melbourne rules, the distance between the goalposts shall be decided by the captains. And the game shall be played within a space of 200 yards or 180 metres wide, and the same to be measured equally on each side of the line drawn through the centre of the two goals. And the two posts to be called the kick-off posts shall be erected a distance of 20 yards on each of the goalposts at both ends in a straight line with them. So basically there's like a 50-metre line and you got to kick it from there after a goal is scored. To have a shot at goal, I should say. Cambridge doesn't have anything stated. Rugby doesn't have anything stated for the size of the fields. Eton says that the goal sticks need to be 7 feet out of the ground and the space between them should be 11 feet. Harrow's bases are 12 foot in width, and the distance between them in house matches is no greater than the distance of the game is no greater than 150 yards. So that one seems to have come from nothing to do with rugby, nothing to do with Cambridge, nothing to do with Eton, and it's more of a kind of a Harrow rule.
Yeah, and you can see some of the rules that go towards the development of soccer ultimately, and others to rugby.
Yeah, you can see this is literally the division of the sports.
Yeah, that's right.
The Eton, Harrow, and Winchester are now starting to make soccer,
having smaller goals.
Rugby and Cambridge are starting to create rugby, I guess. Catching the ball and receiving a free kick. So the Melbourne rule says any player catching a ball directly from the foot may call mark. He then has a free kick and no player on the opposite side being allowed to come inside the spot marked. It's nearly literally exactly the same as the Cambridge rule. When a player catches the ball directly from foot, he may kick it as he can without running with it. In no other case may the ball be touched with the hands except to stop it. And rugby had what's called a fair catch, which is rule 3, which says fair catch is a catch caught directly from the foot. So Eton doesn't say anything. Harrow says the ball may not be caught off any other part of the body but the leg, below the knee or foot. But if after being kicked it hits another part of the body before falling to the ground, it may then be caught. So that's an interesting one.
So you could touch the ball, but have a team mark.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, as long as it didn't hit the ground. As long as it came from below your knee.
Yeah.
Harrow also has an addition to that rule where it says whoever catches the ball is entitled to a free kick if he calls 3 yards. But whoever catches the ball and does not call 3 yards is liable to have it knocked out of his hands. So you had to call the mark.
Yeah.
Which is a very rugby thing. You wouldn't, and that's pretty much what they did in the early games of AFL. Winchester called it handiwork. It is illegal to use the hands. Only the kicks, fullbacks may use their hands to control the ball.
So that's
fullbacks,
the soccer.
It's a goalie. Yeah, this is Winchester. Yeah. So any other man may catch the ball on the full toss, but use of the hands at any other time is deemed handiwork. A catch on the full toss by any player enables them to take up to 3 steps and then bust or punt the ball. So you can only take 3 steps after you caught it. So now we go up to the Marngrook concept, which William Thomas says, when the ball is caught, it is kicked up again in the air by the one who caught it. Arbor Smythe says, some of them will leap as high as 5 feet or more from the ground to catch the ball. The person who secures it kicks it again. So this is a very... this one's flowing through all of them, bar Eton. Now, with reference to high marks, it's been said a lot that this wasn't part of the game until the 1900s. Yeah. However, in 1962, the Bell's Life newspaper, I found, reported a high mark taking place. And this was in 1862. So 4 years after the game's invented, this could literally be the first specky.
Yeah.
And it says here, and one tall youth I noted, with a black beard who often caught the ball and kicked it high in the air, methought too high, and when it came down there was such shouting, "Charge, Conway, charge! On, Nichols, on! Now you have it!" Then one Melbourne youth jumped wonderfully high in the air and caught the ball ere it came near the others, and called, "Mark." This means that he should have a kick.
Yeah, absolutely. The first specky.
It could be. It may have been happening before him, but to say
the
that
first recorded specky.
yeah, but to say that the high marking wasn't a part of the game, I get why they would say that. But into the early 1900s, maybe it wasn't done all the time, but it was being done 4 years after the gun.
Yeah. And obviously was an accepted part of the game. It wasn't just, he wasn't expressing great amazement that this happened. It's just that it happened.
Yeah. If the ball goes behind the goal, so Melbourne Rule 5, in case the ball is kicked behind goal and any of the other side behind whose goal it is kicked may bring it in 20 yards in front of any portion of the space of the kick-off post and shall kick it as nearly as possible in line with the opposite goal. So this idea of a behind comes from the ball just going behind the lines. I always wondered why it wasn't called a point.
Well, that's right. Well, it's worth 1 point.
Yeah,
but it's a behind.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
they must have later decided to have point posts there, so as to have a distance for the behinds.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I haven't looked that up yet, but I will. So that was the Melbourne rule. The Cambridge rule says when the ball is behind, it shall be brought forward to a place where it left the ground no more than 10 paces and kicked off. So it's pretty much the same rule.
Yeah.
So this goal behind the line rule, even though none of them mentioned Cambridge, the two guys that went to Cambridge and whose brother was a teacher at Cambridge
there you go.
are influencing a lot of these rules.
Yeah.
Rugby, none stated because you need to get a try to have a shot at goal. So nothing about going behind because you want to get it behind.
Yeah.
Eton, Rule 14. If a ball goes behind the goal sticks and without being touched, it shall be kicked before them. Any player on the opposite side, if he can touch it first, may obtain a rogue.
A rogue?
Who even knows what that means? It must be like some sort of colloquial version of he gets the ball or something. Or, when you play a game and you're like, you're it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Harrow, Rule 10 says when the ball goes behind the line of either of the bases, it must be kicked straight, as by Rule 9, and then must not be touched by anyone belonging to the side behind whose base it was kicked until it has been touched by one of the opposite side. So it's a dead ball until your team kick it. So if you get it behind and they boot it out until the other team grab it, you can't get them, which has got... It's really not much to do with the Melbourne rule other than you have to bring it in to kick it. Winchester, nothing stated. Pushing, hacking, and tripping.
Oh, there you go.
Melbourne Rule 7. Tripping and pushing are both allowed, but no hacking.
Which is kicking in the shins.
It's horrible.
Yeah, it hurts.
When any player is in rapid motion or in possession of the ball, except in the case provided in Rule 6. The Cambridge Rule. In no case is holding a player, pushing with the hands, or tripping up allowed. Any player may prevent another from getting to the ball by any means consistent with the above rules. So Melbourne said tripping and pushing is cool. Cambridge went, no.
Yeah.
So tripping and pushing must have come from somewhere. So rugby, Rule 13, no player may be hacked and held at the same time.
You can kick them, but not hold them and kick them.
Yeah, pretty much. Rule 14, rugby, no hacking with the heel unless below the knee is fair. So Harrow says all charging is fair, but neither holding nor tripping is allowed. And Rule 12 says all shinning and back shinning is strictly prohibited.
Kicking in the legs, in other words.
Yeah, well, I guess it's hacking as well, yeah. So, look, Melbourne sort of stands alone with that one. They're tripping and pushing's cool, but funnily enough, they're the two that get out of the game in another 10 years.
Yeah.
But hacking's been taken out, but it's a massive part of the rugby rules. So you can see he's rejecting his own school's rules.
Yes.
As much as he's, implementing new ones. So also got here the Mangrook concept. The game, which is somewhat similar to the white man's game of football, this is from Jimmy Dawson, is very rough, but as the players are barefooted and naked, they do not hurt each other as much as the white people do.
No, because you don't have boots on to kick and hack people.
Yeah.
And besides, there's no concept of hacking, no concept of kicking.
No.
It's all just having fun, getting the ball, kicking it high. Stopping it from hitting the ground.
Yeah. The offside rule is the next one. This is the one rule that to this day sets Aussie rules apart from all the other codes of football.
Absolutely.
I like to call it the war rule.
Yeah.
Because what you now call the forwards in rugby union, I saw Martin Flanagan call the heavy brigade, and what they called the backs were called the light brigade.
Yes.
So if you're offside in a war, you're dead.
Yeah, you're dead.
You're behind enemy lines.
Yeah.
You know? Melbourne, no rules exist. Cambridge, if the ball has passed a player and has come from the direction of his own goal, he may not touch it till the other side have kicked it unless there are more than 3 of the other side before him. No player is allowed to loiter between the ball and the adversary's goal. So that is where 2 of the biggest, 3 I should say, of the biggest influences for these rules have come from, and they've chosen to omit that rule.
Yes. And they've completely rejected the war, symbolism of gaining territory, inch by inch, and said, no, let's go for free movement.
Rugby school, rule 5. Offside. A player is offside if the ball has been kicked or thrown or knocked on, or is being run with by anyone of his own side behind him. Onside, a player is on his side when the ball has been kicked, thrown or knocked on or run with 5 yards, or when it is rebounded from the body of any player on the opposite side. It's the big part of rugby is offside.
Yeah.
Eton, no player, if behind before the ball, may pick it up or carry it to one of his own side to touch, but must leave it where it stopped. Rule 29, a player is considered to be sneaking when only 3 or less than 3 of the opposite side are before him and may not kick the ball. There's that weird three thing coming up again. It's in Cambridge and it's in Eton.
And there's references in Aussie rules, early Aussie rules, to the forward kicking as goal sneaking.
Yeah.
And people in the early teams were called goal sneak.
Yeah, what did we used to call them at school? It was a horrible name for those guys. Cherry pickers.
Cherry pickers.
That's right. Yeah. I remember that playing soccer with the Yugoslavian kids that I went to school with in Lalor. I shouldn't say Yugoslavia now because it's not a country, but that's what they all said they came from. It was just post-war. So a lot of them were Croatian and Serbian. And we were playing soccer, and I would just sprint down the field when the ball and wait for the ball to be kicked over. And it got kicked over to me, and then I'd run in and score a goal, and then they'd all scream at me, and they'd be like, offside, offside. I'm like, what's offside? I play football. Harrow. When the ball is kicked, from hand or otherwise, anyone on the same side, but nearer the opposite base, touches or kicks the ball, he is said to be behind. Only if one of the opposite side be between him and the party who kicked the ball. Anyone who is thus behind is considered to be virtually out of the game and must wait till the ball has been touched by one of the opposite side, nor must he interfere with any one of the opposite side or in any way prevent or obstruct his catching the ball. So they have offside as well. Winchester, it's not numbered, but it says behind your side, is designed to stop people from loitering up the pitch.
Sneakily,
yeah. Once a man on your team kicks the ball, the rest of the team must endeavour to get back to the point where he kicked the ball from, not just behind the kicker as in rugby, before they can move forward and up to the pitch. Interesting. Marngrook. No offside was an inbuilt part of the game, as the goal was just to pass the ball around like keepings off. Each side endeavours to keep possession of the ball, by James Dawson, which is tossed a short distance by hand and kicked in any direction. So it's the only one that matches the Melbourne rules is the Mangruk concept. Every single other code that they said they got it from all have offside.
Yeah.
Picking the ball up off the ground, which is an interesting one. The ball may be taken in the hand only when caught from the foot or on the hop. On the hop is like flicking up with your foot.
Like in Gaelic football.
Like in Gaelic football, yeah. In no case shall it be lifted from the ground. In the Cambridge rules, there's nothing to say you couldn't pick the ball up off the ground, but it was just implied. Rugby, it is not lawful to take the ball off the ground except in touch or either for a kick or a throw on. Eton, hands may only be used to stop the ball or touch it when behind. The ball must not be carried, thrown, or struck by the hand. Harrow, Rule 7, the ball when in play must never be touched by the hand except in the case of the catch as stated above. Winchester, it's not numbered, but that handiwork rule says you can't touch it with your hands. So it's the same as all of them, except Melbourne rules have this weird hop kick. Another way to use your foot in the game.
Yeah.
Okay, out of bounds. Melbourne rule, when the ball is out of bounds, the same being indicated by a row of posts, it shall be brought back to the point where it crossed the boundary line and thrown in at right angles. Cambridge, the ball is out when it has passed the line of the flag posts at either side of the ground, in which time it be thrown straight in. So same rule. Rugby, touch when the ball is dead. Consequently, the first player on his side must in any case touch it down, bring it to the edge of touch and throw it straight out. So this is Melbourne, Cambridge, rugby, nearly word for word. Eton, the ball is dead when it is outside of the line of the side sticks and must not be kicked. When the ball is dead, it must be thrown in or a bully formed parallel. I love these words that they throw in there. To the place where it stopped. These are to take place alternately. Rule 27 of Eton, so there's 3 rules for this one. The ball bounces off a bystander or any other object outside the line of the side sticks. It may be kicked immediately on coming back in. So if there's someone on the outside and it hits them and it bounces back in,
you can keep going.
Game on. So if you hit a tree or something, If the ball, when kicked out, bounds off any object without coming in, it must be put parallel to the place where it struck that object. So I think that's whoever sent it out, it's their kick. Kind of like you can see the soccer kind of thing coming in. Harrow, if the ball is kicked beyond the prescribed limits of the ground, it must be kicked straight in again and then must not be touched by the hands or arms below the elbow. Soccer.
Right.
Yeah.
Winchester, they've got to let it hit the ground.
Yeah. And you're also not allowed to, use your hands. So
but you can chest the ball.
Yeah, you can do all that kind of stuff, yeah. Winchester doesn't have any rules about it. Throwing. Melbourne. The ball, while in play, may under no circumstances be thrown. Cambridge doesn't have it, but it's implied by not using your hands. Rugby Rule 11. A catch from a throw-on is not a fair catch. So that means you can't throw, basically.
Yeah.
Eton, Rule 22. Hands may only be used to stop the ball or touch it when behind. The ball must not be carried, thrown, or struck by the hand. Harrow, it's not permitted, and Winchester, it's not permitted. So that one's kind of universal. That works for all of them.